532 AD. From the marble halls of Constantinople, the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire pulsed with ambition and fear. Emperor Justinian dreamed of restoring Rome's lost glory, while the empire's enemies gathered beyond its shimmering frontiers. In the dust-choked provinces, rebellion simmered, and in Persia, a rival empire prepared for war. Amid this tension rose a soldier of unmatched brilliance, Belisarius, a man of loyalty and legend. As whispers of conquest echoed through Byzantium's corridors, destiny stirred. The world would soon witness an empire reborn, not through politics or gold, but through the sword of its greatest general. Born around 500 AD in the rugged lands of Thrace, Belisarius entered a world caught between fading Roman grandeur and the chaos of constant warfare. The Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, was a realm of intrigue, brilliance, and decay. From his youth, Belisarius displayed discipline and quiet intelligence, earning a place among the ranks of the imperial guard. His sharp mind, coupled with an unshakable sense of duty, drew the attention of Emperor Justinian I, who saw in the young soldier not merely a warrior, but a weapon of vision. Belisarius began his ascent as a commander on the empire's volatile eastern frontier, facing the mighty Sassanid Persians. In the brutal desert campaigns, he forged his reputation, mastering the arts of mobility, strategy, and deception. His early victories, particularly at Dara in 530 AD, showcased his genius for turning inferior numbers into triumph through discipline and tactical innovation. To his men, he was more than a commander. He was a protector. In Constantinople, whispers of his victories spread like fire through the city's golden domes and crowded markets. Justinian, ever ambitious to reunite the Roman world, found in Belisarius the perfect blade to carve out his imperial dreams. But with power came envy. The glittering court was filled with schemers who despised the rise of a soldier from humble origins. Belisarius, however, remained unmoved by their plots. He rose not through cruelty or treachery, but through excellence and loyalty, a rare virtue in an age of betrayal. From the dusty frontiers to the imperial palace, Belisarius's destiny was no longer his own. The empire had found its sword, and soon the world would know his name. Emperor Justinian I was a ruler consumed by vision to restore the lost greatness of Rome. Yet, in a court steeped in deceit and ambition, true loyalty was rare. Among the sea of flatterers and generals, only one man earned the emperor's full confidence: Belisarius. Justinian saw in him not only a commander, but the embodiment of Roman discipline and faith. Belisarius's victories in the East, especially his triumph at Dara, had proven his brilliance, but it was his incorruptible character that bound the emperor's trust. Justinian entrusted him with impossible missions: to defend the empire from Persia, crush rebellion, and reclaim the lost provinces of the West. Their bond was not one of friendship, but of purpose. The emperor was the mind, Belisarius the sword. Yet beneath that trust lay a shadow: Justinian's suspicion of all who grew too powerful. Belisarius served with humility, knowing that the same emperor who praised him might one day doubt him. Still, he never wavered. To him, duty outweighed pride. As Constantinople glittered in the sun, a silent understanding united ruler and general, an unspoken pact that would soon shape the fate of empires and echo through history. The eastern frontier of the Byzantine Empire was a land of endless struggle, where the deserts of Mesopotamia met the steel of the Sassanid Empire. It was here, in the searing heat and shifting sands that Belisarius faced his first great test. Stationed at Dara in 530 AD, he commanded a vastly outnumbered army against the formidable Persian general Perezes. The Persians were veterans of countless wars, their cataphracts gleaming like bronze gods beneath the sun. Belisarius, though young, fought with the cunning of an old master. He transformed the battlefield into a trap, ordering trenches dug in secret, archers hidden in flanks, and cavalry poised for the perfect strike. When the Persians advanced, confident in their might, the ground itself betrayed them. The trenches shattered their formations. Byzantine arrows rained death from unseen positions. Then Belisarius unleashed his cavalry in a thunderous charge that broke the Persian line. Victory at Dara was not merely a military triumph, it was a revelation. The empire had found its greatest commander. To his soldiers, Belisarius became a legend. To his enemies, a phantom of strategy. His baptism by fire on the Persian frontier forged the sword that would soon reshape the world. In 533 AD, Emperor Justinian I turned his gaze westward toward the long-lost provinces of the Western Roman Empire. North Africa, once a jewel of Rome, had fallen to the Vandals, a Germanic tribe that established a powerful kingdom centered in Carthage. For nearly a century, the Vandals had ruled the Mediterranean seas, their fleets threatening even Constantinople. To restore Roman dominion, Justinian entrusted his boldest general, Belisarius, with the impossible: the reconquest of Africa with a small force of just 15,000 men and 5,000 cavalry. Many in the Byzantine court mocked the plan as folly, but Belisarius saw opportunity where others saw ruin. Setting sail from Constantinople, his fleet braved storms and treacherous waters before landing near Caput Vada, on the African coast. There, Belisarius imposed strict discipline: no looting, no harm to civilians, a stark contrast to the chaos of ordinary campaigns. His goal was not just victory, but to win the hearts of the people. Roman population still living under Vandal rule. The first great clash came at Ad Decimum, near Carthage, where the Vandal king Gelimer sought to ambush the Byzantines. The battle was chaotic: scattered skirmishes, broken lines, and dust-choked confusion. Yet amid the turmoil, Belisarius's calm leadership turned the tide. He regrouped his men, struck with precision, and shattered the Vandal forces. The next day, Carthage opened its gates without resistance. Belisarius entered the ancient city not as a conqueror, but as a restorer. In less than a year, Belisarius had achieved the impossible: the reunification of Africa under imperial rule. His triumphal return to Constantinople was greeted with awe. As he marched through the Golden Gate, leading the captive Vandal king before him, the people hailed him as the new Scipio, the savior of Rome reborn. Yet even in glory, Belisarius remained humble, knowing that victory often kindled envy in the imperial court. When Belisarius entered Carthage in 533 AD, the city that had once defied Rome now stood silent in awe. Its streets, lined with marble columns and crumbling relics of empire, echoed with the tramp of disciplined Byzantine soldiers. Yet there was no plunder, no flames, no cruelty. Belisarius forbid his men from looting, declaring, "We come not as destroyers, but as restorers of Rome." His restraint astonished the citizens, who had long suffered under Vandal rule. Within days, order returned. The markets reopened, churches rang with prayers, and the imperial standard once again flew above the ancient harbour. Belisarius dined in the palace once occupied by the Vandal kings, but sat humbly, surrounded not by luxury, but by his loyal officers. To his troops he offered gratitude, not gold. To the people, protection, not oppression. Word of his triumph reached Constantinople, where Emperor Justinian proclaimed him the savior of Africa. Yet Belisarius accepted glory with quiet dignity. For him, victory was not in the spoils, but in the restoration of peace and Roman order. Carthage had been reborn, and with it, the dream of a united empire flickered once more, fueled by the courage of its greatest general. With the fall of the Vandal kingdom and the return of Carthage to imperial hands, the dream of Emperor Justinian I seemed within reach. The rebirth of the Roman Empire. For the first time in nearly a century, the Mediterranean shimmered once more under the banners of Byzantium. The victory was more than territorial. It was symbolic, proclaiming to the world that Rome still lived, not in ruins, but in the will of its people and the brilliance of its generals. In the heart of Constantinople, the triumphal procession of Belisarius was a sight unseen since the days of ancient emperors. The streets overflowed with cheering crowds as golden chariots rolled past, carrying the spoils of Africa, jewels, armor, and the bound banners of the defeated Vandals. At their center rode Belisarius, calm and dignified, leading the captive King Gelimer, whose defiant pride had turned to quiet resignation. As they passed beneath the Golden Gate, Justinian himself watched from his throne. His vision of a restored Rome seemingly fulfilled. But even amid the cheers and glory, a shadow lingered. The emperor's pride was mixed with unease. Belisarius's fame now rivaled his own. The people whispered the general's name with reverence. Yet Belisarius, ever humble, dismounted before the emperor, bowing deeply, dedicating his triumph not to himself, but to God and the empire. In that moment, the Eastern Empire shone with renewed brilliance, its armies victorious, its faith restored, its name feared and honored once more. For Justinian, it was proof that destiny still favored Rome. For Belisarius, it was merely another duty fulfilled, one chapter in a life that would soon lead him to new frontiers, where the fate of Italy and the legacy of empire would again be tested. Flush with victory in Africa, Emperor Justinian I turned next to Italy, the ancient heart of the Roman Empire, now ruled by the Ostrogoths. Once the seat of emperors, Rome had become a fading relic under Gothic kings. In 535 AD, Justinian entrusted Belisarius once more with the impossible: to reclaim Italy and restore the West to imperial rule. With a modest army, the general sailed across the Adriatic, landing in Sicily, the gateway to Italy. Within months, the island was secured, and Belisarius pressed northward, his banners advancing toward the Gothic stronghold of Naples. The siege of Naples tested his patience and ingenuity. When the city refused to surrender, Belisarius discovered an ancient aqueduct and used it to send his soldiers through the city's heart. Naples fell, and the road to Rome lay open. By 536 AD, Belisarius entered the Eternal City to the acclamation of its people. Rome, once abandoned, now restored to imperial hands. But the joy was short-lived. The Ostrogothic king Witigis gathered a massive army and surrounded Rome with 150,000 men, determined to crush the Byzantines. For nearly a year, Belisarius and his small force endured famine, disease, and relentless assaults. Yet he held firm, using the city's ancient walls, brilliant counterattacks, and psychological warfare to wear down the besiegers. When reinforcements finally arrived, the Goths broke and retreated north. Belisarius pursued them relentlessly, capturing Ravenna, their capital, in 540 AD. The Gothic king surrendered personally to Belisarius, offering him the crown of Italy, an offer the general refused. Instead, he sent the captive king and his treasures to Justinian, declaring the peninsula reclaimed. Rome, Africa, and much of the Mediterranean now bowed to the emperor once more. Yet even this magnificent victory sowed the seeds of mistrust. Justinian, wary of Belisarius's rising fame, recalled him to Constantinople. The savior of Rome returned home, not to celebration, but to suspicion. Still, his conquests had achieved what none had since the fall of the West: the restoration of the Roman dream, carved not by emperors, but by the sword of Belisarius. In 537 AD, the ancient city of Rome once more became the stage of history's great struggle. Belisarius, commanding a small Byzantine force of barely 7,000 men, faced the colossal might of the Ostrogothic king Vitiges, who descended upon the city with nearly 150,000 soldiers. The Goths intended to erase the last echo of Roman glory, while Belisarius vowed to defend it to the death. The siege was brutal. The Goths cut the city's aqueducts, leaving its citizens parched and desperate. Famine and disease spread through the narrow streets as arrows and stones rained from the skies. Yet Belisarius's resolve never faltered. He turned Rome's ancient walls, crumbling relics of a bygone empire, into instruments of defiance. His engineers fortified the gates, his archers haunted the battlements, and his cavalry launched daring night raids that struck terror into the Gothic camps. For a year, Rome stood unbroken. Citizens who had once feared ruin now saw in Belisarius the spirit of ancient heroes. When famine gripped both armies, it was the Goths who finally faltered. Vitiges, his vast army shattered by attrition and despair, withdrew northward. Rome, bloodied but unbowed, had survived. Belisarius's defense of Rome was more than a military triumph. It was a resurrection. The world saw that even in decay, the Roman flame still burned. Through courage, intellect, and endurance, Belisarius had turned ruin into legend. From the ashes of empire, he forged the image of a man who stood alone against the darkness and prevailed. The last great Roman, guarding civilization's heart with nothing but his will and his sword. Victory in Italy had made Belisarius the most celebrated man in the empire. His name was spoken in markets, sung by soldiers, and whispered in the corridors of power. Yet in Constantinople, glory often bred suspicion. Emperor Justinian I, though grateful for his general's triumphs, began to fear his growing fame. Courtiers and rivals fanned the flames of jealousy, painting Belisarius as a potential usurper, a hero too beloved, too powerful. When Belisarius returned from his conquests, he was greeted not with honor, but with cold formality. His wealth was seized under accusations of corruption, his soldiers dispersed, and his voice in the council silenced. Even his wife, Antonina, once his closest ally, was drawn into the web of intrigue, aligning herself with Empress Theodora, whose influence over Justinian was absolute. Rumors and lies surrounded him, yet Belisarius endured every humiliation with quiet dignity. Still loyal to the emperor he had served, he accepted new commands when lesser men would have rebelled. To Belisarius, duty was sacred, even when repaid with betrayal. The man who had restored Rome now faced the crumbling trust of his own ruler. In the glittering capital he had defended, he became a shadow, a hero without favor, a servant without faith. The tragedy of Belisarius was not his defeat in battle, but his defeat by envy, betrayed by those he had protected. Forgotten by the throne he had upheld, he remained steadfast, proof that true greatness lies not in conquest, but in honor. Even as the empire he saved turned against him, Belisarius's loyalty endured, his legacy shining brighter than the treacherous court that sought to dim it. Time, betrayal, and exhaustion began to dull the sharp edge of Belisarius, once the brilliant sword of the Eastern Empire. Years of relentless warfare against Persians, Vandals, and Goths had drained both his armies and his spirit. The emperor he had served so faithfully now viewed him with suspicion rather than gratitude. Justinian I, consumed by paranoia and political pressure, no longer saw Belisarius as his savior, but as a reminder of his own dependence on another man's greatness. In his later campaigns, Belisarius was sent once more to the Persian frontier, but with limited troops and meager supplies, a hollow echo of his former glory. Where once he commanded legions, now he led remnants. Yet his brilliance had not faded entirely. Even with little, he achieved much, defending the empire's borders with courage and cunning. But each triumph was met with indifference, each victory with silence. The court that once hailed him now turned its gaze away. By the 540s, whispers spread that the empire no longer needed its old warhorse. His rivals, envious courtiers and scheming bureaucrats, ensured his isolation. Stripped of command and wealth, Belisarius retired to his estate in quiet disgrace. But even as his power waned, his honor did not. The once mighty general who had restored Rome, conquered Africa, and defended civilization's heart, now lived in humility, a symbol of fading valor in an age of corruption. The empire still stood, its walls unbroken, its enemies subdued, all forged by his hand. Yet the hand that once held the sword of Rome now trembled in solitude. The empire's greatest defender had grown old, and the emperor's sword, once shining, had been left to rust. In the marble corridors of Constantinople, victory was never enough. The brilliance of Belisarius had restored empires, yet within the shimmering walls of power, envy festered like rot beneath gold. Courtiers, senators, and generals whispered in dark corners, weaving lies that poisoned Emperor Justinian's mind. They spoke of Belisarius's loyalty as ambition, of his fame as rebellion. Each triumph that had once brought glory to the empire now cast a shadow over the throne. At the center of the intrigue stood Empress Theodora, sharp and calculating, who feared the general's influence as much as she envied his honor. Through manipulation and deceit, she ensured that Justinian's trust in Belisarius wavered. Even Antonina, Belisarius's wife, was drawn into this dangerous web, torn between her devotion to her husband and her allegiance to the empress. Surrounded by whispers and betrayal, Belisarius walked the palace halls as a stranger among those he had defended. His victories on the battlefield had earned him immortality, but in the empire's heart, daggers of jealousy sought to erase his name. The same Rome he had revived now conspired to forget him, proving that in Byzantium, the greatest battles were not fought with swords, but with shadows. In 559 AD, age had crept upon Belisarius, but duty still called. The once invincible general, now in his 50s, lived in quiet obscurity when a sudden danger threatened Constantinople itself. A vast horde of Huns and Slavs swept across the Balkans, striking terror into the heart of the empire. The capital trembled, the emperor's armies were scattered, his generals hesitant, desperate. Justinian turned once more to the man he had cast aside. Belisarius, weary yet resolute, answered the call without hesitation. With only a handful of veterans and hastily gathered citizens, he faced the invaders near the walls of Constantinople. Strategy replaced strength, wisdom replaced numbers. Using deception, swift maneuvering, and the terrain to his advantage, Belisarius routed the barbarian host in a stunning victory. Once again, the savior of Rome had risen, the old lion proving that his spirit still burned bright. But his triumph was fleeting. No parade followed, no honors were given. The emperor, now aged and wary, offered only silence. In the years that followed, jealous courtiers accused Belisarius of conspiracy. He was briefly imprisoned, his dignity stripped away. Though later restored, his reputation never recovered. In the twilight of his life, Belisarius lived humbly, sustained only by the memory of his service. The man who had rebuilt empires, defended civilization, and carried the Roman dream across continents died forgotten, his glory buried beneath imperial jealousy. Yet history would not forget. In time, legends would call him the last of the Romans, a man whose loyalty outlasted betrayal, whose courage defied decay, and whose name, though dimmed by ingratitude, would forever shine as the empire's greatest. The twilight of Belisarius was not marked by the clash of swords, but by silence. The silence of an empire that had forgotten its greatest son. In the cold marble of Constantinople, the once mighty general, who had carried Rome's banner from the deserts of Persia to the ruins of Carthage and the gates of Rome itself, now walked as a relic of a fading age. His triumphs, which had restored Justinian's dream of a united empire, were now inconvenient reminders of loyalty repaid with suspicion. Years of political intrigue and whispered jealousy had done what no enemy ever could. They broke the spirit of the empire's most faithful servant. False accusations of conspiracy struck again in his final years. His enemies claimed that Belisarius plotted against the emperor, and the aged hero was imprisoned, humiliated before the very people he had once protected. Though Justinian later ordered his release, the stain of disgrace lingered. The empire's conscience had been silenced. Legends tell that Belisarius, blinded and reduced to begging in the streets, cried out, "Give alms to Belisarius, whom virtue has impoverished." Whether myth or truth, the tale reflected a deeper tragedy, the moral decay of Byzantium itself. An empire built on faith, law, and valor had turned against its own virtues. The man who had embodied its ideals became a mirror showing its corruption. When Belisarius finally passed, there was no triumphal procession, no public mourning. Yet beyond the gilded walls of power, soldiers still whispered his name, and the people remembered the just general who had once restored Rome's glory without cruelty and defended it without pride. In the end, Belisarius's fall marked more than the tragedy of a man. It marked the decline of Rome's spirit. The empire survived for centuries more, but its conscience had died with him. Honor, once its shield, had given way to ambition and deceit. And though the Byzantine Empire would endure, its heart had grown hollow. For in betraying Belisarius, it had betrayed the very ideals that once made Rome eternal. His sword had rested, but his legacy endured, gleaming brighter than the empire that had cast him aside. Centuries have passed since the banners of Byzantium faded, yet the name Belisarius endures, a symbol of loyalty, brilliance, and tragic virtue. He conquered empires, restored Rome's glory, and served an emperor who could never match his greatness in spirit. Though envy sought to erase him, History remembered what politics tried to bury. Belisarius's life stands as a testament to the power of duty over pride and of integrity amid corruption. He fought not for reward or throne, but for the idea of Rome, for civilization itself. In every age, his story echoes, the just man betrayed by the world he saved. Where emperors' names have turned to dust, Belisarius remains eternal, not as a ruler, but as the conscience of an empire, the last guardian of Roman honor and the living proof that true greatness requires neither crown nor throne,